Since we finished Malachi, I'd like to take an intermission from the Minor Prophets, and before we start the next one, and renew my own mind with just truths so I'm preaching to myself this morning, and hopefully you'll get some benefit out of it. This is a topic. What's that?
Well, I'm asleep.
Yeah, watch it on YouTube later. How would that go? Interacting with myself. I bet you I could do it. So what do you think? Well,
Oh, Jim.
man, that's the best answer I've ever heard. You really have insight into the text that I have.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay. What we want to do this morning, I'm actually, rather than preaching one text, I'm preaching a topical, look into the prayer life of Jesus. And as we look at his prayer life and what the Bible says about his prayer life and what Jesus actually taught about prayer, it'll give us some insight into how that should affect our praying. The Bible doesn't say, or the Bible just, when it talks about the prayer life of Jesus, it describes what Jesus did. And from that, we're going to infer truth about prayer. That is quite important. So, let's pray ourselves, and let's ask God to help, and let's get into the Word. So, Brett, would you pray for us?
Sure. Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for bringing each of us together, Father. We just know that where two or more are gathered, you are here, Father. So I just thank you so much for showing up, Lord. I just pray that you would speak through Jim, Father. Just give him the words, that we can just understand, so we can then, therefore, just learn to love you more, Father, and know you even greater. Father, I just love you so much, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.
I've got 6 different texts here that we want to look at in Matthew, Mark, and Luke about the prayer life of Jesus, and see what we can infer from that. So let's start in Luke chapter. Let's start in Mark chapter 1. Let me go out of order here. It might even be this might be the 9th one now that I'm thinking of it. Mark chapter 1. I want you to look at verse 29, and we're going to focus on verse 35. And tell me what you see. It says in verse 29, and immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. And now Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever. Immediately they told him about her, and he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all. Now this is an important verse here. That evening at sundown, so sun's going down, right? They brought to him all who were sick and oppressed by demons. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. Can you imagine such a thing? Imagine the whole city of Maryville gathered at your door, outside, camped out on your lawn, and waiting in line to come see you. And verse 34 says that he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. How long do you think it took him to deal with the whole city? I mean, the whole city is there. He's ministering into the night. Yeah? And then verse 35 says, and rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out into a desolate place. And there, what did he do? He prayed. Now, Jesus is out ministering like crazy. He's got all kinds of people coming to him. I just want you to imagine, people are coming to you and you're ministering to them. You have what they need. You have the counsel that they need or whatever it is. And yet, you finally shut the door and say, I got to get a couple winks of sleep come back tomorrow maybe is what he said. Who knows what he said. But then in the middle of the night, very early in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm guessing, 4 o'clock in the morning, while it was still dark, however early that is, he gets up and he goes into the mountain to pray. You would say, Jesus, you had a hard night ministry. You need your sleep. You might say that. What does this reveal about Jesus and his compulsion and maybe his necessity of prayer? What do you think is being seen here, at least, in Jesus' mind about praying?
I think if you would have said what you said to Jesus, Jesus, you had a hard night ministering, you need to get some sleep. Jesus would have said, I had a hard night ministering, I need to pray. That's based on his actions. I think that's what he would say. And knowing still that there's other people, more than likely, that still need him, you need to pray.
And there's more power in prayer than rest. And when you seek God's power and you have it, then he gives you rest.
Yeah, here's my problem with all of that, and that's a right statement, both of you. My problem is prayer isn't really relaxing to me. In a lot of ways, prayer is often for me, as I'm just being real with you as I talk about praying, it's often work for me. So I want to ask myself the question, why is prayer work for me? Why is prayer hard for me? And why is it in the middle of the night I would rather go to sleep than get up and go pray? Because have you ever had the thought, I need to pray, and then the next thought comes to you, I need to sleep. And then you make the decision, pray or sleep, and it's usually, for me, 9 times out of 10, it's sleep and not pray. So already I'm convicted here by just the actions of Jesus. But why was it a necessity for Jesus? Why was he compelled to pray? And me, it's labor intensive to pray. What is it about my mindset about prayer? What is it about your mindset about prayer that makes it really difficult to pray? So maybe we can share in common. I can share what makes it difficult for me to pray. One thing, it's hard to hold a conversation with a person you can't see. I mean, it's quite difficult to talk. When a person's there, you have interaction. I hear audible voice back to me, and there's interaction, and there's...
That was one thing that on a Bible study Wednesday night, one of the questions was, is your prayer basically one-sided, or was it
Was it a monologue or a
there
dialogue?
you go.
Is my prayer a monologue?
And
or a dialogue?
I took offense to that to begin with. But as I thought about it, it's about
The times come when the people will not endure sound doctrine. Yeah, I mean, certainly prayer is intimate communication between the Father and his children. Ultimately, we think of prayer as some religious act, but really what it should be is a nourishing communication, fellowship between the Father and his children. I should go, I think of my children and how I so enjoy them to come sit in my lap and embrace and hug my neck and kiss me, and I love when they run to me, and when they're excited when I show up outside, So there's Paul Washer makes it the statement from the Song of Solomon, how Solomon speaks of just the joy of one glance from her eyes. And he relates that to God and us. Prayer is that glance. And God is like, very excited to have you glance at him. So what is that? If that's what prayer is, what does that tell us then about prayerlessness? The is to God. It's prayerlessness could be if the glance is giving God the attention, then what is prayerlessness?
Lack of attention.
Yeah.
No attention.
Neglect.
What's that?
Neglect.
Yeah, is that what you said? So, go ahead.
what do you think he was praying about?
Oh man, would I have liked to have been there to hear? I'm serious. I would like to have been there to hear.
So was it a combination of what happened the previous night and what's going to happen. I mean, you spend a lot of time in prayers, it's just, we don't, there's a lot of gray areas for me, I don't know why.
No, there's no doubt about it. We don't know what he was praying about. However, that's where the prayer teaching of Jesus, when he teaches us to pray, that'll give us much more insight in what we should be speaking of when we pray. John 17 is a prayer conversation God has with the Father that gives us insight into how Jesus thinks, and that would be, and I read that this morning, in fact, in preparing my mind for this. We're not going to get there maybe until next week to the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6 and John 17. We want to look at his actual praying. But I guess what we want to do is infer as much as we can infer from this. What must we say about Jesus in prayer when we see him giving it such a priority? That I just gave an answer. Jesus gave prayer priority. Priority over what? Here's the hard thing for Jim Pearce. Priority over ministry. In fact, I think there's a place where it says that Jesus sent the crowds away and went to pray in the mountain. I think that's when he fed the 5,000. He sent, and I made maybe one of my texts here. He sent, yeah, there it is. It's Matthew 14, which we're going to look at that. But he sent the multitudes away. Here he's got, I mean, imagine if there were multitudes from Maryville, and they come here and say, Jim, teach us, teach us. And I teach them for hours, and they say, keep teaching us. It'd be the dream of my ministry life, right? So if all I ever do is minister to neglect of that communion with the Father, then I've missed it. So that tells me something about what God desires. While God desires us to proclaim, you have to remember that your own personal walk with God is why he made you. The other aspect, the ministry aspects to this isn't to neglect ministry, but it's not to make a God out of ministry. There is a way to idolize ministry. And so I speak to Michael and me, who kind of do it on a more full-time basis in a lot of ways. We have to be careful that our relationship with God doesn't center around the success or failure of ministry. And you too, as you enter into young life, is my communion with God only related to what he can do for me as I minister to people? And that's very, very important. We must at least acknowledge that prayer is, and that communion with the Father should be prioritized over many and all things, if not everything, in the Christian life.
I kind of think, going off that, being involved with crew and young life, I've heard a lot of people that it's always just about the ministry. Like anything they want to do, it's like, well, I have this idea for crew and this, and I can think of one person in particular that it was never about just their walk or just them, but everything they ever talked about was how can this benefit crew? And I had to kind of step them back and say, it was someone that thought they needed to be on the leadership team, just to have that title. And I was saying, just because I'm on leadership, I'm not any better than you. But I think that you need to take a step back and realize that it's not all about crew. You have your own ministry, with the Lord. And instead of focusing so much on crew and I have to do this and I have to do that, there's so many other opportunities and there's so many different ways that you can draw close to him. And then I was kind of thinking about what you were saying, and I feel part of the reason we don't pray is it's kind of selfish. I don't think that we thinking about it, we don't think of it as being selfish, but I think we believe we can do it on our own. Hey, we're doing this, we don't need to talk with you. Hey, I've got everything under control, I'm doing this and this and this, when finally you're just going to get worn out and have to just, break down and go to him in prayer. I was kind of thinking of that when you were talking about just ministering for days and days and days, because I know you wouldn't think about that as being selfish, I'm doing the work of the Lord, but I think in a way it is almost selfish. I don't know if it's kind of how I processed it, I guess.
Yeah. least self-reliant. Yeah, it would be
And we gotta remember
maybe
that
not
Jesus-
selfish, focusing on myself, but rather depending on myself.
Yeah.
Because Jesus had that with his Father before he was here. And I know that he missed that, and praying was the way to connect. And I found that, on the other hand, of prayer, sometimes I'm afraid that I get too casual with it. And remember that God is the creator, above all, and most of the time when I talk to him, it's like I'm talking to anybody else. And then sometimes I get to the point where, especially if I'm praying for missionaries and the needs of quite a few people that I know, I start thinking, okay, Lord, all I need to do is mention your name. You know what is happening in this life. But then it's like I'm just passing it off. It's like I'm not really praying, and I think that's why sometimes what prayer for us is kind of difficult. And then I think, okay, what if when your husband comes home from work, what do you want to do? You don't want to just sit there. I have to really make my mouth shut so I don't go, and so my prayer life swings from one thing way over to the other, and everything you guys mentioned is, I think, probably each one of us at some point or another in our prayer life.
John 14 gives us a little insight into Jesus a little bit. His mindset and how he did what he did. If we think about ministry, if we think about, he says in verse 10, do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me, he does the works. That's interesting. The Father who dwells in me, he does the works. What is that revealing about? Who did the miracles that Jesus did? Did Jesus do them or did the Father do them? It seems that Jesus is saying the Father did them. Inside of him, so to speak. Okay. In John chapter 5, you kind of get the same thing in verse 19. So Jesus said to them, truly I say to you, the Son can do nothing on his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, that the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. And greater works than these will he show him, so that you may marvel. For as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whom he will. The Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. And whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. So, and he goes on. But here's Jesus speaking, I only do what I see the Father doing. So I would say that to answer yet kind of back to your question, part of what we can see in prayer is that I think this is Jesus spending time getting in communion with the heart of his Father. So as he hears from his Father and he sees his Father working, he goes and does those works. But let's just call this priority. He gave prayer priority. Not just because it's an important thing, but rather prayer was prioritized over ministry because apart from God, we can do nothing. So Jesus says, abide in me and I in you, but apart from me, you can do nothing. And so we have to keep in mind that prayer must be prioritized in our life.
I think that we don't truly believe that.
Oh, I'm in agreement. What I started this lesson by was I need to remind myself of these truths because this is an area in my life that I want to bolster and help because it's always been a struggle. I don't know about you, but prayer has always been the struggle of my walk.
Well, no, I mean, like, I don't know that we really truly, fully believe that apart from Him, we can do nothing. I think we can do a lot of great things. I think that we think that if we do everything right and we say everything right, then it should happen. I think that.
I've already found out that doesn't work. That
We
doesn't
kind of
work.
boss God around, and say, look, I did it all.
Yeah.
And now you're not moving here.
What?
The concept of, I'll do all this stuff and God now bless it.
Yeah.
Right?
Bless what I'm doing.
Something that Paul Washer says is, he says, from where did your last breath come? Who made your heart beat? And just reminds us that, listen, we can't breathe or have our hearts beat apart from God. And he says you can't untie or tie your shoes apart from the power of God in your life. But we think, like you said, that we can do all these great things, but
I mean, there are men who can't tie their shoes.
yeah.
I mean, if I were to, I've said this before, but I think about it. If I were to get hurt in some way, I wouldn't be able to work. And I'm not able to work, we're not eating. And all of a sudden, we don't have food on the table. Why? Unless God sustains my health and my life. So that's very real.
I think you're right, deep down, because it's hard to grade your prayers. Okay, was that a good prayer? Or was that not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
was
think
that
we even should
successful? Was that not?
grade our prayers. Is that a good prayer or not?
Yeah.
Well, I think Francis Chan is a really good illustration about this. About you're doing stuff and you're like, yeah, it's going well. It's like riding a bike, a little kid riding a bike, taking the training wheels off for the first time. I'm riding a bike, but really dad's got a hold of the seat the whole time, right?
No, that's Jim Pearce's illustration.
Nothing. You sure?
Yeah.
I feel like I got that.
I heard that.
Somewhere else.
That was my illustration.
Awesome.
Sorry, I should shut up.
And Francis Chan probably said it too.
I didn't get it from him.
So, but the point I'm making is we don't always see that it was God that did that.
Yeah.
So,
Because if we're looking there, he's back here, is that your point?
well, he's making stuff happen, but we don't always know that. We don't always see that he made that happen. With the kid, their experience is I'm riding the bike, but it's dad holding the bike up. And for us, it's like, yeah, I'm ministering and cool stuff happened, or I got up to preach and I preached well, and I did some prep work and it was a great sermon and people were encouraged and I'm like, what I see is, hey, I did stuff and then I preached a good sermon, but what really happens is the Spirit guides my preparation and then the Spirit speaks through me and then the Spirit speaks to the hearts of people and the Spirit encourages and the Spirit teaches.
It's so much easier to see that played out when we fail. Because we look at what we did and that's junk. How can that amount to anything? And then you have evidence that something good came out of it. Rather than, like you're saying, all the successful things in our eyes and then actually successful results appear to have happened. So it's better when things go crummy and then you're like, how could anything good come of that? And then God has done something.
We could pray not to succeed. Lord, help me fail.
That's why we're cracked pots. That's why that's second.
Well, the guy George, I wanted to tell you, what's his last name? His prayers.
Have you been reading his autobiography?
Yeah.
Oh, have you?
No, I just found it online.
That's what I did.
Time again, that man,
And,
he was really.
and the only one that knew about it was God. That's it. That's the real thing.
He was testing God. That's what he was doing. He was wanting to prove that if by praying and having full faith on God that we could accomplish great things and that he would provide. He was documenting that that's possible.
Documenting the faithfulness of God.
Right.
Yeah. I read the introduction, and just the introduction, and I think it's the foreword to the edition I was reading, was talking about how he set out to,
3 things to prove to, I think they're like 3.
yeah, I mean, he set out to do ministry, and really it was for orphans, and then also for advancing the gospel and having the gospel be taught. There's 2 different organizations that he kind of started, and in both of those, he said that in an age where people no longer believed in a living God, that God was alive and active and doing things, he wanted to demonstrate God's faithfulness in such a way that no man could say otherwise.
So if we then, let me say it this way, back up. It is by our humility before God and knowing who God is and who we are that we can truly start to pray in the Spirit's power. Because when we truly see God as who He is, the all-powerful, the almighty, the all-sovereign, and who we are, that we can do nothing apart from Him, then that drives us to go to Him all the time. And that will drive us to, when He does hold the bike seat, to praise Him for it, because He's doing it.
You've hit on an important truth that I wanted to kind of, when my response to Steve, don't grade your praying. There is a way, I think, grade it with proper criteria. I don't want to grade it with this criteria. Did I say the right words? Did I use good phrases? Did I pray for good things? But rather, I think ultimately, Brett hit on it a little bit. Prayer is the revealing that you indeed believe that God is your only hope. So when you go to Him, not praying like those in the synagogues that we see the men, but go to God in sincerity and dependence upon God, the fact that you are praying is revealing the fact that the truth of your heart, that you indeed know that you acknowledge that He's God and that your only hope is Him for whatever you ask Him for. So that's how you would grade it. So I would say at the end of the day, you shouldn't pat yourself on the back, but if you wanted to look at the fact, I just prayed. Wow, that's what that did was reveal my heart that I need God. And I think partially that's what prayer is. It's a declaration of dependence upon God. And prayerlessness is a declaration of independence upon God. And so ultimately prayer then is a big revealer of the heart of man, which is a very scary thing. But remember, you are now much more unholy than you now know. So you try to look at the deeds in your life really kind of reveals. Remember, we're not looking to those deeds for salvation. Christ is our only hope of salvation, but those deeds do reflect our intimacy with the Father at this moment. Whether we're a distant son or a son that's nudged up under the wing. So ultimately, I think Jesus prioritized prayer because without communion, and I don't want to say prioritize the act of praying, but remember what prayer is. It is a going to the Father. So let me just say it that way. He prioritized His time with the Father, his communion with the Father. He needed communion with the Father. There's a way to think about prayer as an activity, a religious thing that you do. And I don't ever want anybody to think of prayer as a thing to do, but rather it is the act of going to the Father.
It's a manifestation of the dependence that you have upon God.
Yeah.
Realizing, playing out, knowing that nothing comes from Him. I think that illustration that Michael said about the breathing, I've thought of that before, heard it before too. If you really park there and think about willing your own heart to beat, can you really even do that? And I think things
We often
like
just take it
that,
for granted that it's going to
we
keep
do,
doing it.
right? And then, but if you think about that and just kind of dwell on that, that's where you can really start to bring yourself into a mindset that you really cannot physically do that to yourself.
It reminds me of Samson. He assumed the Spirit was still with him. He didn't know that.
Yeah.
The assumption.
What else can we learn? So I guess the application there is, what is it that you've prioritized over prayer? What is it that I've prioritized over prayer? That I have said, you know what? I don't have time to pray. I got to do this thing. What you've done is cut off the power source to some degree. Let's look at Luke 5 for another text. I think the biggest place we fail in prayer is this first and most simple of all of the steps to pray. The reason why you don't pray is because you don't do this. So here it is, Luke chapter 5, verse 15 and 16. But now, even more, the report about him went abroad, and great crowds gathered to him, and he healed their infirmities. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. King James says that he withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed. The key phrase I want to focus on is he withdrew. The biggest part of praying, the first part of praying is there has to be a withdrawal. Withdrawal from the world. And where would Jesus go? He would go into the wilderness. He would go into the mountain. He would go into the garden. It seems like Jesus would always get out of his house. He didn't have a house, but get out of someone's, and he would go somewhere desolate. Somewhere where desolate means there's no people. And so I think, for me, the times when I said, to my wife, hey, I'm going out to pray, or whatever, I'm going for a walk, I'm doing something, I'm getting out, that's when I actually pray. But I don't know about you, but when I was a student, you might relate to this, I don't know, I could not study at home. I would not study at home. I was too distracted by stuff. There were too many distractions, too many things I could do. The bed was calling my name, TV was calling my name, computer games were calling my name, Nintendo or whatever it was calling my name. So what I would do, and she suffered from it, but I would have to do, I'd go to class from 6 to 9 at night, and then I would go to the library, the theological library from Region that was open until 12 o'clock. And I would, from 9 to 12, study. Because I would study there. I would withdraw from her and my bed and my house. And I would. So I think one of the things, prayer is indeed hard in a lot of ways. For a lot of practical reasons, it's a difficult thing. But I think if you will do what Jesus did, he would withdraw himself. I think if you just take that first step, a lot of that, the rest of the praying will just fall into place. There's another verse in Luke 6, verse 11 and 13. Somebody else read it. 11 to 13 of Luke 6.
They, however, were filled with rage and started discussing with one another what they might do to Jesus. During those days, he went out to the mountain to pray and spent all night in prayer to God. When daylight came, he summoned his disciples, and he chose 12 of them. He also named them apostles.
Okay. Well, what do you notice in verse 12? It came to pass in those days, what did he do? Went into the mountain to pray. In Mark 1, we already read it. It says that he departed into a solitary place. So number one, we need to prioritize prayer. Number two, we need to withdraw. Prayer is characterized by withdrawal. Okay. Number three, I see a deliberate action here. In other words, he was very deliberate. He sent the crowds away to pray. So, that took the prayer wasn't hey, oh yeah, I think I'll just pray now. It was, I need to pray. This is important. I prioritize it. And he deliberately took steps so he could indeed pray. He would go to the mountain. He would go to a solitary place. It was on purpose. So a failure to plan to pray is a failure to pray, I would say. So I think that's another point that we can make, is that I think if we're going to give the priority to pray, we need to be deliberate about it. Illustration here. Have you ever said, hey, we ought to do lunch together? But if you don't then set the time and the day that you're going to do it, you'll never do it. Man, I ought to pray sometime. Or somebody says, hey, will you pray about this? You say, yeah. What you mean by yeah is later on, at some point, at some time, I'm going to pray about that. But happens to you whenever you say, yeah, I'll pray about that. You go away and you forget that you said you're going to pray. You forget about the thing because you weren't deliberate. What you should do is deliberately in that moment say, hey, let me pray right now. You don't want to forget in an hour from or you know what I mean? Or plan, write it down on the calendar, do whatever you have to do. But I think prayer, we miss the bodily exercise profits a little. Rather, discipline yourself unto godliness. And so, my wife, on purpose, with Nancy, they deliberately come at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning to work out. If my wife didn't do that, she'd not work out. She wouldn't. She has to be deliberate and disciplined about that. And so I would say that we need to take the cue of Jesus here, just taking cues, inferring here. We need to be withdrawing. We need to be deliberate about our prayer life, our communion with the Father. The other word I want to give to you here, this would be number 4, solitude would be another word to characterize the prayer life of Jesus. Doesn't mean we don't pray with people, but he got away. He got a place where he could be alone with the Father. That's a big deal, solitude. Hard for my wife to find solitude. She's got kids all the time, so she's going to have to be, if she's going to go and do what I'm teaching, she's going to have to be deliberate in order to gain that solitude in this busy life. Any other thoughts related to those words? Priority, withdrawal, deliberate, solitary, or solitude. These are words that I use to characterize just Jesus' prayer patterns here.
I think with withdrawing, I don't know if it's more of a college younger person thing, but I've heard the term thrown around. It's called FOMO, fear of missing out. And there's a lot of times, like, especially when I was at camp this summer, they're like, you're always going to want to see what's going on, like, be with these people. So, like, if this month you're not, like, when I spent a month in Minnesota, they talked about this. It's like, if you're not, like, withdrawing yourself and spending time, like, in the Word, like, praying, like, you're not going to grow. So, like, I'm not sure if it's, I know I have that, because, like, if something's going on, like, I live with 5 other guys, people are over all the time. So it's like, if something's going on, I like to be there. So that really sticks out to me, like, really withdrawing yourself and going to a place, because, you can say you're going to do it as much as you want, but if you're right there, you might not even be having a good time, like, sitting, people are just talking and you're just kind of sitting there, but when you could be, doing so many other things, like, so I think, that's something really important for me, just to get away from people, like I can't study at my house, like, unless I'm really cramming. And so, I don't know if that's like a Christian lingo thing, like FOMO, but I've heard it a few times.
I've seen it on Facebook.
At camps I've been at. So.
I've never seen that, but I've experienced it.
Yeah.
And God uses our prayer time too to speak to us too. If he's speaking to us in a still small voice, if we're not secluded, sometimes we don't hear. Sometimes we choose not to hear, but sometimes.
So that's one thing I'm not very good at. Shut my mouth when I'm praying. Just
That's hard. It's hard.
Shut your words off, because how are you gonna hear from God? Keep blabbing. I'm not very good at that.
It's a double-edged sword, though, in that as you be quiet, your mind begins to wander.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes a discipline, again, to stay at least focused on your dependence on God, whatever.
That's practice. It takes mental practice to do that. And I think I know that myself, I've gone out and done that. I'm like, I'm going to be quiet and just listen. I'm not going to think about anything. 20 seconds later, I'm thinking about what I got to do, this, that, and the other. And so I'm going to joke, I can't do that. But yet, you have to discipline yourself. It's just like, no, I'm going to try again. I'm going to try again. Tools, not rules. It's not like, I failed, I'm going to give up. No, I'm going to keep trying, because that will produce godliness and righteousness in the end, because then you'll be able to hear from God and you will be able to meditate on His Word, and instead of taking the time and instead of like always being jumbled and can't focus. The reason we can't focus, I heard just recently about somebody's like, the reason we have such a sports craze and we can remember all these details about sports, but then once we come to God's Word, we say, oh, I'm distracted, I can't do this. And so it's because we don't take the time and practice at this and practice, because we try and then we give up too quick. But we will sit patiently and practice on other things. It doesn't obviously have to be sports, but on other things, and we will learn those very easily because we take the time and effort that puts into it. Was it easy at first? If you go back in your memory, it wasn't that easy at first. But you had a determination. Do I want to know God? And that's what I've had to ask myself recently, is that, do I want to know God? And then that's going to take time and effort and practice in order to know who He is. And that goes right along with prayer. I know I've kind of gone off to the spiritual disciplines perhaps, but I think the more you know God, the more you'll know how to pray to Him.
But you'll also know more how to hear from Him. Emily had a very good question. She said, how do you hear Him at all? Whether you're talking or not.
That's the last point we're going to be talking about.
Perfect segue.
Or not, I guess.
Perfect segue.
Oh, you want to end now?
No, I'm just saying.
Well, on something we were just talking about, FOMO, as I think about that, instead of having a fear of missing out on doing things with other people, perhaps we should have a fear of missing out with God, of missing out on time communing with the Father, missing out on things that He might be doing through us if we were praying. So.
I think one of the reasons we struggle with how you said it, Brent. Why do we practice on these things but not practice? I think ultimately you continue doing what you feel success in. I think ultimately that's one of the difficulties. You don't really get tangible feedback, except George Mueller did. Pretty often you got tangible feedback. But there's not an immediate tangible feedback in prayer sometimes, or in the Word sometimes. But have you ever, I remember Brett, when we were going through Galatians, there were some light bulb moments that Brett had, and he seemed to really enjoy knowing something brand new. And I enjoyed seeing him enjoy. But there's a sense in which it kind of encouraged a deeper study into what we were doing. A lot of times when we experience that, hey, that wasn't. I think that's the problem. Part of the problem is that we need to find that joy and that success, so to speak, in the prayer life. But what your mindset going into prayer will determine how you feel coming out of prayer. I'm coming to prayer to get God to do for me, or I'm coming to prayer to hear from Him, or I'm coming to prayer. Whatever the mindset that you enter into prayer will be a determiner of what you get out of that prayer time. So the question is, we need to shape our minds. What really should we be going into prayer with the mindset? And that's the Lord's Prayer helps us with that, as well as John 17 and some other texts. Now, another passage that we just looked at, verse 12 of Luke 6, he says, verse 12, in these days he went out to the mountain to pray, and all night he continued in prayer to God. And when the day came, he called his disciples and chose from the 12, whom he named apostles, whatever that means, apostles. Think of, he prayed all night. And what precipitated an all-night prayer time for Jesus. He had a big decision to make, didn't he? He had 12 disciples to choose the next day. But the word that comes to my mind to pray all night long is concentration. I mean, how much concentration would that take? We have 5 minutes and we're thinking about different stuff. But to pray on a particular topic all night and to hear what that would have been like, I don't know. But that tells me that he thought what was coming up was serious enough. He had to get the mind of God, and he spent all night doing it. Just an observation. Do you observe anything else or related thought? He went into the mountain to pray, and he continued all night in prayer to God.
I think there's an encouraging word for me. Like, we think that it's like, okay, we're going to get focused on prayer, and we're going to do this, and I'm going to have hours of prayer, and I'm going to do this. That's my schedule. Rather than to go, okay, I'm not a very good prayer, so I'm going to schedule myself 5 minutes a day. That's sometimes a big step. Might need to be 2 minutes a day, or a daily routine. Anytime during the day, pick time and do it. And we want to jump in headlong and go, I'm going to have hours of the prayer. It's like, no, you're not. Because you're gonna try, and 10 minutes you're gonna be asleep if it's in the morning or night, whenever you fall asleep. And so, and then you're gonna get up. You're gonna be like, I failed, and I'm not gonna do that anymore. I'm a failure at that. You're gonna experience that failure again. And I have to constantly remind myself, it's like, I'm gonna start small. Set small goals for yourself. And then you will see yourself successful in those things. So that's what you were saying, is we see us being successful in our hobbies, and we continue on. And so we want to do the same thing with the spiritual disciplines, is that we set the small goals for ourselves. Instead of, I'm going to read through the Bible in a year, why don't you try a chapter? In a year. Right. No, I'm just saying, though, that you set the small goal. You try to digest all what you can out of something, rather than, I'm going to hit a huge thing and
It's kind of like
read 10 chapters a day.
kind of like the January syndrome, with the New Year's resolutions. But to tag along what you said, I think if you add the withdrawal to that, I think a lot of the withdrawing will remedy some of the problems we have in praying in our homes or whatever, that we getting away from the. I mean, why is it that you can be more spiritual when you go away to camp? Because you're withdrawing from your work. And there is time to get alone and get away. You leave your phones. That's why camps have those rules, no phones, and they do that. And the kids have a great time. They actually feel closer to God when they come back than they ever did. Why? Because they withdrew. And I think a lot of our failures in that, like you mentioned, a couple falling asleep or feeling, is because we don't fully withdraw. That was just what came back to my mind. So if you go back to what Brett's saying, make a goal, and I would say, but add the withdrawal to it and set that goal and then go do it, and then maybe feel that success.
Well, also, even the disciples went, right, when he's in the garden, he says, come and pray with me, and
We're getting ready to get to that verse, but yeah. No, I'm just saying, it's a good one.
But that helps encourage me to know that they were there. He chose them. They were a lot more spiritual than me.
Yeah.
And they could make it. But like Peter, I'll die for you. I'll do this, and then you'll deny me 3 times. Well, I can really relate to Peter because I think like that. And this movie came on. Jim watches those old movies, and it was the French army. One guy wanted to save his reputation, so they were going to go take this hill that couldn't be taken with no way. And they knew they were sending these guys out to just die. They come out of the foxholes, and as soon as they start to charge, they're shot and fall back in on the other guys. So they can't charge, they can't get out of the foxhole. So then when they come back, they want to shoot them all as an example of cowardice. So they say, pick so many guys from this unit, and we're gonna kill them for this. And when they have them in the prison, they fought many battles, they were brave men, but they let them choose 3 people that were gonna be killed. And I had this really good thing that when I'm in a movie, I can put myself right there. So I'm in this prison, and I know, and I'm feeling some of the things they're feeling. You know, and they sent a priest in to talk to him, and one guy said, he gets drunk, he says, this bottle, that's my, you know, and the priest is trying to talk to him and everything. And this one guy, he just, I don't wanna die, I don't wanna die. And the other guy was saying, I have a wife and a child and that. I'm thinking, okay, here I'm a Christian, I'm in this spot. I should be happy. I should be happy because I know that I'm gonna go be with him. And when I first watched that movie, my first thoughts coming in is not Christian. It's not. And I want God to be there and to give me the strength to stand for him no matter what. So if I can't even do it when I'm watching a movie, I'm not going to be able to do it in real life. And so then when you think about this and you say, okay, God, I'm putting you there. That to me, that's not praying, but sort of, because I'm talking to him and I'm saying, hey, I want to be able to stand to the end, no matter what. And I know where my weaknesses are, and somebody's going to come to me and say, you know, you're going to die right now. I want to be able to say, you can kill my body, but you can't kill my soul. I want to be with him.
As you were talking about being disciplined to prayer, my experience has been that there are times when I am encouraged, I'm zealous to do a thing, and sometimes, like Jesus prayed all night. He didn't pray all night every night, though. No. At this time, he said, I need to pray, and he was of the mind to do that. And there are times where I'm like, you know what? I should pray a lot more than I do. And I'm like, okay, I'm really encouraged, so let me go do 5 minutes. But the reason I do that is I'm like, well, but I will always be this encouraged, so I better not, do it a lot now, because then I won't do it, I'm not going to do it a lot later. But I remember back when I was
blacked out.
It is. Well, it is, right? But here's what I'm getting at. When I was first saved, for example, it's like, you're zealous, and people tell you, don't set big goals for yourself, because then you might get burned out or whatever. I just want to say, if you're encouraged to do it, man. If you want to do it, make it happen. Don't be like, oh, but I can't sustain this, so I shouldn't do it now. No.
I wonder if Jesus watched the clock and timed himself and said, yeah, I think I've communed long enough with the Father.
Right.
No, he communed with the Father until he met with him, and he was satisfied that he heard from him.
Right.
And so we're trying to put a time increment on it. I think that we shouldn't limit ourselves that way.
I think
putting it as an upper limit. Right? You guys are seeing it as an upper limit. It's not.
No, I think you're right.
You don't overshoot your deal, overshoot it. I'm saying though, if you don't pray at all and you end up praying 5 minutes, that's a goal.
Right. No, I think it's good to be disciplined. I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong, but I want to say that don't set a low goal because you're afraid you won't meet it either. Do what you're led by the Spirit and encouraged by the Spirit to do, and go over and above. Because you will see fruit and benefit from that. Even if
I think maybe hearing tension, not there's no tension, but hearing what all of y'all are saying, you're speaking to different things. I think ultimately, what goal am I setting for prayer? I think that's the issue. If I'm setting a time limit, I've missed it. Right. If I'm setting, I want to get 10 minutes of praying, then I've missed praying. I want to hear from God on an issue, or whatever prayer it is. I want to commune with the Father, and when I've communed, is what Christy's hitting on. So we need to make sure we're thinking about prayer in the right manner. A couple more I want to hit. Did I squelch your conversation, or we?
Well, I just want to make sure that Brett wasn't offended by anything I wasn't saying. I wasn't actually speaking to you directly, just the idea of that time frame. I think, if we start to begin to look too much at that we'll just.
I think Brett was saying something important. I think you were saying something. You speak past each other, and you're not speaking.
I wasn't trying to rebuke him or anything. I just
don't know that I've been heard. Right, and, but I think.
What you said.
Great. I'm just saying though that I see myself as not praying enough, and I always want to pray more. And so, in order for me to discipline myself to godliness, I set myself goals. And if I end up I'm a really good 5-minute prayer, maybe I'll set my goal for 10 minutes. And if you know what, if I overblow that 10 minutes because I'm having a great time, it's great. But then the next day comes, I'm not going to feel that. I better stick with my 10-minute goal. That's what I'm getting at. It's not the fact that I'm going to stifle God's interaction. There was one night where I stayed up till midnight, and that's rare. But still, I started studying God's Word at 9. And I'm like, I just want to keep going. And so I did. It's not, and that doesn't happen every night. That happens once a year. So, but yet I need to still set myself goals. And,
But what I think you're saying too is that, but in that, the 10 minutes isn't it. What's my goal in this 10 minutes?
that might become more later on in my life.
Well, but ultimately, the goal in the 10 minutes is to meet with God. I want to meet with God for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
So I think ultimately, but don't set, the time limit isn't the end of it. It's what happens in that time period, which I think that's what we're both, so I get you.
Because sometimes the Bible says pray without ceasing, so I think the more you pray, pretty soon, sometimes you pray and you don't even realize you're praying. Or when the Spirit says He intercedes for us, there's lots of times that God said, I don't even know what's going on, Lord. I don't, but you do. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And we go on. And then I think sometimes when we don't even realize it, we'll get to the point where we pray without ceasing.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I was thinking too, I don't think we realize how much we do commune with the Father. I mean, I don't know about you, but you aren't in my head. So in a sense, I have withdrawn at times when I am here inside of my head meeting with the Lord. You don't know what I'm talking to God about inside of here. And there's times where you can't go to the mountain. You're in the moment. You've got to be withdrawn.
There's actually a text, I think it's in Luke, but there's actually a text where he says, and while he was, I don't know, something to the effect that he was with them, but not with them. And I'll have to find it, but it gives that very notion that there is a way to, when you're unable to withdraw, you can't withdraw, but that's a little harder to do. Let's hit a couple more before the end here. Let me just read Matthew 14 as a way to just 21 through 23. And they that had eaten were about 5,000, besides women and children. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him onto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into the mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. So that again just reiterates what we've been talking about. What are the words? Priority, withdrawal, deliberate, solitary, concentrating. Okay, those are some of the words. Now let's look at another one. Matthew 26. This is Jesus in the garden, the night before his execution. Matthew 26. What do we see in Jesus' prayer here? Somebody who hasn't read it, you read. Verse 39 to 41.
And he went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, My Father, it is possible that let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, So you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
41 is a big deal we'll look at shortly. But I want you to focus on the phrase where he says, and going a little further, what did he do? Verse 39. fell on his face and prayed. So what's that revealing about Jesus and his prayer right now? This is hard. This is going on. This is sincere. This is desperation. He's in agony. He's in burden here. So I think though this is one prayer out of many, we want to make sure that our prayer isn't some activity we just participate in every day, but rather this is something that's out of sincerity in our heart. I want my desperation, my desperate need for God to be felt in reality when I pray. I don't want prayer to become something I just do because I'm supposed to do it. We want to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of
Third wheel. Third wheel.
Oh.
Your moms have prayer wheels when they walk by in the morning, you get to the flame, and that's a prayer.
One of the things that I have to watch out for is how many of you pray before you eat?
Inconsistent.
Yeah. I pray almost before I eat every meal, but if you're not careful, Lord, thank you for this food, amen. Now let's eat and get it over with. I make it a point internally to feel the weight of God. I don't have this food unless you give it to me. And you gave me this. I remind myself of that truth almost every time I pray, so that now that I'm giving thanks for this, I'm actually giving thanks, not saying words. Right? And so we want to make sure that as you pray, you will have routines of praying. You'll have things you pray all the time, over and over, things, repetitions, but you want to make sure that they stay fresh and new, that you're actually thinking about what you're saying, and that it's coming from the heart, and the reality of the heart, not just coming out of your mouth, because this is something you do. God, I want my prayer life to be characterized by falling on my face before you. I want it to be real, sincere, coming from the heart. I want to be desperate in things of this nature. Yes, this is a very desperate nature here. He's going to the cross tomorrow. But still we can learn something from the prayer of Jesus here, the way it describes what he did. Ready for the next one? Then he says, my Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. He's asking for something he wants. But what's the next breath? Nevertheless, your will be done. Is it okay to ask for stuff you want in prayer? Yeah, but you need to have a heart of submission behind it. But whatever I ask you for, here's what I really want. I want your will to be done. So I think that should characterize our praying, that as we request things of God, it's right to request, it's right to ask, because we have a Father who loves to give gifts to his children. But we need to also have the heart of Jesus when we say, but God, I'm not seeking my will in this request. I'm seeking yours. So if you can find a way, God, for your will to be accomplished and me not go to the cross, that's what I'm asking for here. But nevertheless, if the cross is it, your will be done. That's the way Jesus is praying. So how should that sound as I'm praying for some activity in my own life? God, here's what I want. Here's what I'm thinking, God. Here's what I want in this situation. But here's what I really want. I want your will to be accomplished in this situation. What do you want to be done? Part of prayer is really just getting your mind aligned with the Father's. As you're thinking about your life and what God's doing in your life, I think ultimately prayer is really aligning your mind with God's mind. It's just it's an exercise of, God, here's what's going on in my life. You know it. You're ordering it. Here's what I want. Here's what I want you to do. But really, I want what you want. So I'm getting my mind in line with your mind right now. That's really, I think that's what Jesus was doing in the garden. He really didn't want to go to the cross, but he was getting his mind in line with the Father. But Father, you want me to go to the cross. And I know there's no other way. So your will be done. And now I'm getting my brain and my mind and my spirit ready to go through this thing. I think that's a big part of praying. Which brings me to the next point. Am I going too fast? I just see time running out, so I'm going through 5. What does Jesus give us a clue here? He says, he goes to the disciples, verse 40, and the disciples are there sleeping, and he says to Peter, what? You couldn't even watch with me an hour? Already that's conviction. Prayer for an hour for Jesus was nothing. He calls that nothing. Not even an hour, like it's something little for us. Oh, God. And then he tells Peter something. He says, watch and pray so that you don't enter into temptation, because the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. What does that tell us about the way Jesus thinks about praying? What is prayer intended to be? Preparation for what? For future temptation. Jesus knows the temptation. You know what he's talking about, don't you? What's the temptation tomorrow? To deny me. You better be praying. What's Jesus' temptation tomorrow? To not go to the cross. To forget the cross. So he's getting his brain ready to do this thing. And he knows what's coming for Peter too. He says, watch and pray so that you don't enter into the temptation that's coming tomorrow. In other words, there's a sense in which the prayer is the preparation to win in the face of temptation. So what does that mean about sin that you know you're going to be tempted with tomorrow? What sins plague you, or what temptations plague you every day that you need to prepare for tonight? So prayer then if you know you're about to enter into some situation in which temptation will be there, what do you need to do? Pray. Get your mind ready to do God's will in the face of that temptation. Jesus was praying, God, I'm going to the cross, and I'm going to face agony, and I know I'm going to struggle. So he prays all night to prepare himself for it. What did Jesus do? What did Jesus do in the wilderness for 40 days before he meets Satan and enters into this temptation period? What did he do? He fasted and prayed for 40 days because he's about to be tempted in a way that no one's ever been tempted before, or whatever. He's about to undergo great temptation. So what did he do in preparation for that? He fasted and prayed for 40. He got his mind ready for the temptation. So prayer, really, one big part of praying is getting yourself ready for sin temptations.
There's also praying that, like, Jesus didn't pray before he became a man. He was with God and he was God. So to me, it's kind of like the prayer, especially with Jesus, that is a human way for God to bring us to himself
I
and the
like
kind
that.
of
I think
relationship
that's-
we're going to have.
I think that's right.
Well, scriptures do say that Christ is in heaven making intercession for us as well. So I don't know that I think there is.
I don't think that means prayer.
I think there is a sense in which the Son always had a certain communion with the Father.
That
You
Hebrews,
might call that prayer.
I'll have to teach that text one day. I used to think that. I believe that text is referring to Jesus ever lives to make intercession for the saints. I don't think that means he's up in heaven praying for us, but rather the point of that whole text was that he's not dead. He ever lives. And his blood and his sacrifice is ongoing, and that blood shed for us intercedes for us. That's the context of that text. I don't think Jesus is up in heaven praying to the Father. I think rather that, which is the way you kind of think about he ever lives to make intercession for us. But rather, his blood is what intercedes on our behalf, and he's not dead anymore. He ever lives. He lives. Read that context. I think it's Hebrews 4, if I remember right. The end, or Hebrews 6, I don't know. It's in that first several chapters. But I think ultimately prayer is marked by, to agree with you on another level now, but not from that text. Prayer is communion. And Jesus prays to the Father in John 17 to restore that communion, to restore that glory that he had with the Father. So how do we have communion? He says, Father, restore me the way I was, I and you and me, and then give that to them. There's this very real sense in which that prayer is indeed our through the Spirit way to access the oneness with the Father. Not oneness. That whole text in John 17, which we may look at next week, is about oneness, not with each other, but oneness with the Father. And so Jesus had a perfect understanding of that oneness with the Father. I think prayer is the acknowledgement and the fulfillment of that oneness, that communion with the Father. Last piece I want to hit on, we need to quit for his sake, He says in verse 41, watch and pray so that you don't enter into temptation, because the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is what? Weak. He says, pray because your flesh is weak. So what does that tell you about prayer? What does prayer do for you? It strengthens you. It strengthens. There's some aspect of prayer that brings strength to the flesh. So you want to fight, you want to win spiritual battles. Your spirit might be willing. Spirit's in there saying, do this, but what does Paul say? The things I want to do, I don't do. So I think Jesus is implying here that to strengthen the flesh, we need to enter into prayer, watch and pray. So there's just some things I just kind of saw as you know, as you do a study of the language of prayer. And there's more to say. Any other thoughts there that we can say before closing?
One thing that I was kind of thinking of, I think you touched on it in crew one night, but kind of like when you say for, you know, there's mission trips or something for the summer, you kind of have two options. And I don't want to take your words out of context and correct me, but I feel like you had kind of mentioned, like, some people are just, oh, I can do this or this, God, which one do you want me to do? And they expect to see some miraculous sign where it's like, you get a letter in the mail from God that says, go here. But I think you talked about how if your mind, like, you really understand the will of the Lord, like, that you can almost, like, look at things and discern which is right or wrong. Is that kind of what you...
Well, the way I would say it, the way I probably said it, is that some people say, well, I prayed about it, and this is what I, as if prayer is a magic pill for my Lord, which one should I do? And then afterwards they just, what you should do is allow God to speak to you through His Word, using the Word to discern. But as you pray, you're praying over the Spirit. God, I want proper application to this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think indeed you should do what you want to do, because it's God who works in you to will and to do of His good pleasure. Assuming a couple things are true. Number one, I indeed want God's glory. I want His wisdom. Number two, I have been looking to the Word for counsel. And number three, I have indeed in prayer been submitting to His will. At the end of the day, well, where do you hear the answer? Ultimately, as that Word is applied in your life, make your decision. Decide. And so make it discern from these things, not just this willy-nilly, well, I think Lord, which one should I do? And then I have a good feeling at the end of that prayer, oh, I think I'll do that. And that's the way people talk about it.
Because I get a lot of people, they say stuff like that, and I remember that since you said it, so I wanted to make sure I was still... I didn't want to just say, well, you're not going to hear from the Lord. Like, I didn't want to... I obviously don't mean that, but to some people I'm like, if your mind is, lined up with the Father's, like, you're going to know what is right to do. Because some people are just, oh, I like this guy and this guy, and it's like, what do you? Like, there's some people I've had, and so I just wanted to make sure that when I do say something to that matter, that
I just don't think discerning the will of God has to be a hokey-pokey Holy Ghost experience where it's a willy-nilly pie in the sky kind of mindset where somebody says, well, I prayed about it, I think this is what I should do. What do you mean when you prayed about it? Did you mean I searched the scriptures, I went to counselors who gave me the word of God, and as I prayed, I said, God, I see this word and I understand it to mean this, so this is what I want to do. Nevertheless, your will be done. If that's what you mean by I prayed about it, then I'm okay about it. But if you mean I prayed and afterwards I had this good feeling and goosebumps ran over me, and that's how I know I should do this thing. That's why I know I should join this church. That's why I know I should go on this mission trip or that, or go to this place or that. But remember Philippians 2:13. It is God who works in you to will and to do His good pleasure. Hebrews 13:21. It is God working in you that which is pleasing in His sight. So there's a very real sense in which God works inside of you what He wants you to do. So if you have a desire to do something, and it's not a wrong desire, and it matches up with the Word of God, and it lines up with truth, and it would be a good thing. I would say go do it. You know what I mean? As you discern that from an external, because God gives you, if you want to go to Brazil on a mission trip, then go. If you want to go to Brazil on a mission trip because there'll be a lot of bikinis, no, that's not, no. But if you're thinking, man, they're lost and I can speak Spanish and man, it'd really be the joy of my heart to go do this thing, then it's God who works in you to will and to do of His good pleasure. In your prayer life, confirm it with God, here I go, but nevertheless your will be done. Based on my knowledge of the Scriptures, based on my heart and what you're working in me right now, this is what I think I want to do. So here I go. But God, direct me, nevertheless your will. So that's where the prayer comes in, seeking God's will. It's the acknowledgement of the mind to God that says, I'm not sure here, God, but this is what I think. Here I go. Direct me, guide me. I'm trusting in you because you promised to direct my steps. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He will what? Direct your steps. Proverbs 16:9, a man's heart devises his way, but the Lord directs his steps. So I'm trusting God to direct my steps. But listen, if I'm walking according to the flesh, making my decisions according to the flesh, and then saying I prayed about it, that's using Christianese to just support my fleshly desires. But if I'm really doing all those things I already said without saying them again.
Well, I think it's important too, if you can know that, like, for example, I had something come up in my mind and my heart, and I said, okay, Lord, this is what I want. And, that confirmation, it's not necessarily going to come right when I get off of my knees. But over a series of time and events where I said, Lord, I just need to hear from you on this and direct me and help me with this. He clearly spoke to me through His Word and in places I wouldn't even have looked myself. I said and confirmed things through my husband, and he did on more than one occasion. And I kept going back, are you sure? Because I really don't think you mean no. And he kept doing, he kept saying no, no, no. But in my mind, it was one of those mission trip or something else good that you could do. But God said, that's not one of those good things you're going to do right now.
I think He does that a lot. Especially if you're praying for the choice of what to do, and if He doesn't want you to go, you won't go, whether you want to or not. If He knows that that's not where He wants you, then it won't work. You can try it, but it won't work. So you have both of those. God saying, I have your path set. I'll take you step by step. You're going to Him. You're asking Him, and He's guiding you. If you're going and asking Him because you want to go this way and you don't care what He says, then you go that way anyway, then whatever happens, happens. But when we know we're going where He guides us, then we know that He's right there with us and taking us every step. And I think that's like with Steve and Andrea, going to Panama. And this year they didn't go because God didn't make the way. That's what they wanted to do, and they listened to what He said. They just do things all the time that just simply amazes me of following God's will like that. But when He wants you to go, you'll get there.
So let me review just the words that the prayer life of Jesus was characterized by. Priority, withdrawal, deliberate, solitude, sincerity, concentration, submission, preparation, and strength. That'll help us as we think about prayer. Someone who hasn't shared yet, maybe. Which one of those maybe helped you the most or spoke to you the most? In what way?
The fact that Jesus was praying for knowing that He was going to the cross and still was concerned about His disciples and praying for them during that time, that they would be strong and all together. Always thinking about others is that,
For me, I don't usually think about just strengthening that. That was good encouragement for me. But I don't usually think about, okay, I need to pray so that I don't fall into temptation.
I think the withdrawal was big for me, especially it's not always withdrawing from bad things, but from good things as well. I think the Lord was, teaching, doing great things, and He just had to take Himself out of that.
Andrea, want to hear from you? Which one maybe sticks out most in your mind?
Probably the priority one, because there's been a situation with me where I'm doing something that is valid. It's a good thing to be doing, but sometimes my prayer time is suffering because it's during the time I normally would pray. So often then when I come home, I don't pray because, well, that was supposed to have happened 2 hours ago. I get too much in a routine, and then I feel like I can't do it at another time, which is silly.
Yeah, I think when you think, here's a good thing, and I can do that, and praying, I can do that. So find a way to do both if you can, but just where do you prioritize things? Good. Anybody, somebody, how about you, Joe, if you don't mind sharing this, anything?
I would withdraw, kind of go to my place in the country and just turn the TV and listen to a few stations on the radio. Stay away, just withdraw.
Well, I hope you're encouraged to go withdraw this week and be deliberate, be solitary. Doesn't mean you stop ministry. It doesn't mean you stop doing things. Just maybe let's prioritize prayer, and while you're doing it, really rekindle our mind. We also encourage you to be meeting with each other deliberately on purpose to pray together. If you don't have a prayer partner, get one. And meet on purpose to pray. Pick a day, regularly or semi-regularly, and do that. That's important. Let's pray. God, we love you. We need you so much, and we acknowledge that now. Asking that you, Lord, as we just enter into ministry, as we seek to share your word with people and to do your will, we ask that you'd help us, God. Help us to know that we can't do it on our own, and then, Lord, call us to prayer. Help us in this weakness of ours. We struggle. I don't know why we struggle fully, but you know why. You know what's in our heart. Reveal it to us and strengthen us in this area, that we might just have that upward cleanse on a more and more regular basis, Lord, and that cleanse may be satisfying to you and satisfying to us. Amen.